My cousin told me about a campaign that a friend of a friend was making over Discord. A campaign where we would be traveling merchants. I loved the idea, so I rolled up a bard and met the gang. They all seemed pretty nice at first. When the game started, one of the players started acting quite rude, but nothing to get mad about. Then it happened. We wanted to convince an NPC to hire us to plan his wedding, and my cousin wanted to loudly call the NPC his new friend, walking up to the NPC's table and maybe buying him a drink to celebrate his proposal. To this, the rude player yelled out, "No, you are not doing that. You're stupid, and you only talk when I tell you to." We thought this was an in-character move. The game proceeded and we convinced the NPC to hire us, but I got quite greedy. I wanted to cast friends on him to convince him to pay us more, but the rude player just said it was a dumb idea and I'm just an idiot for thinking so. My cousin wanted to talk to the NPC again, and she went mad, saying, "I did not say you could talk!" The game ended there. Next week, the DM said that the rude player and the guy she came with just left the server. Sadly, the game slowly faded away after this. The most utterly random control freak story we've ever gotten. I mean, there's controlling, and then there is this. I haven't seen this in DnD, but I have seen this in way too many raid groups. Okay, just jump right here. And, oh, by the way, hey, Arcsoul, I have to ask this. What is that helmet you're using? Because I need to get that thing on my warlock.
Can you clear the mic? Seriously, what is this? Small talk? We're not supposed to be having conversations. We are supposed to be getting. And you're only supposed to jump if you have a small talk, or if
Guardian down.
Told you.
Hello, hope you're all well. This is my story, my first ever attempt into Dungeons & Dragons about 15 years ago. Something I heard plenty of, yet I never tried. But when I heard my robotics club in high school was playing, I asked if I could give it a try, and they said sure. They watched me struggle through the process of figuring out how 3.5 worked, and decided I would make a simple half-elf fighter. My first trial of combat was some kind of rat swarm that got stronger at night, and it was a swarm of 100 plus rats, all theater of the mind, so I had to imagine where things were, which is important later, and we were dealing with them with what I would call minion rules these days. The biggest pain was the swarm got stronger as the fight drew out, because it was getting closer to night each round, I guess. Why was this swarm even there? Was it important to our quest? I mean, who knew? I really don't remember too much of the in-betweens, though I do remember this one moment where our reward was a golden greatsword, where I thought, oh, that would go great with my class, before our teacher just called first dibs, and that was that. And I had to negotiate with him if I wanted it myself. But hey, the biggest moment I do recall is when we were going across this random arena, in the middle of nowhere, because what is a plot? The Dungeon Master checks if we want to give it a shot, the majority says sure, and thus, the arena match began. This started with me, in a cage, slowly being lowered towards a pool of acid. Even if I had a ranged weapon, the bars were too squished for me to be able to fire. So when my turn came around, all my newbie self could say was, I mean, I don't know what I can do, so I might as well pass on my turn. The Dungeon Master replies, well, you could look for the lever and tell the others where it's at. Okay, how am I supposed to know there was a lever in the first place? There was no map, there was no description except for the fate I was headed towards, and I hardly had the experience to know how things worked, whereas the other people were casting tornado spells and throwing Molotov cocktails into them for fire tornadoes. More turns pass, and eventually I do get to see the lever and let my party know. And now what? Why weren't you trying to swing your cage? I never thought of that. Would be good to know that is something that I could try, so I do that now. Except I waited too long, and now the cage was in too deep, and I could hit a wall if I kept trying, so I just kept doing nothing instead. By the time they reached the lever to get me up, the lower half of my body was already in the acid for long enough that I was pure bone, yet I was still alive somehow. They even had a necromancer animate my legs to my body, so I guess I was half elf, half undead now. Things did not get too far before we had to focus on competition, and the sessions just fizzled out from there. Looking back, it was an utter garbage of a start, but I think I still had hope I could do better later down the line. Well, the next time I got to try and play was with someone with a DMPC whose level was over 20, multi-class 4-ways, yet still aimed to play mentor while we tried to figure out the task at hand. So yeah, another session that didn't really get too far. Honestly, I don't think I ever really got anywhere until I got into 5th edition with my current Dungeon Master, and now I've been having the itch to DM myself. Well, good for you. You have plenty of object lessons that you can learn from. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I am all for high school club Dungeons and Dragons games, but just be aware what you're getting into. Here, D&D is secondary, and therefore, it's not gonna have the same engagement that a group that is there to play D&D is going to have. You're not there to play D&D, you're primarily there to do your competitions, right? And to practice. I was thinking of doing a D&D game in my speech and debate club. This is in high school, way before I ever started actually getting into DMing and Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm kind of grateful that I never did that because I know it would have been a disaster. People would have been distracted, no one would have been taking the game seriously, and I think as a DM, I wouldn't be having as much fun. I'm not saying it can't be fun, I'm just saying know what kind of fun you're probably going to have. It may not be the same as a roleplay heavy group that's meeting for 4 hours a week, but hey, it can still be enjoyable, you know, as long as you avoid item stealing teachers and horrific acid pits. Okay, so I've wanted to play D&D for a long time. I did a lot of research, and I finally signed up for a one-shot campaign in my local board game store. It was going great, I loved the party, but then something really unpleasant happened. In short, we walk into the room, we see a crown. Paladin sees that crown is bad, so he turns to my rogue, telling them not to touch the crown. So, you know, I don't. But the paladin accidentally throws it off the altar with his tail, and something happens. The DM explains how everything felt really wrong, and we heard someone. Me, being a rogue and stupid, decided to pick up the crown since, you know, someone had already touched it, and whatever was supposed to get activated had probably already gotten activated. As soon as I do that, the Dungeon Master asks me to throw a charisma check. I fail, so he tells me my eyes turn black and I don't control myself anymore, and my character runs off in some direction. Another rogue tries to hit the crown out of my hands. They succeeded with the roll as far as I remember, but the Dungeon Master said I'm still holding the crown? So my character runs off in the direction of another character, who at this point has no idea what's happening. That character runs after me. After that, my character gets on an altar, and while the other characters have no idea what's going on, my character stabs themselves in the chest. The DM says I'm dying, so I'm not dead yet, and I'm thinking, okay, the paladin will help me. Surely, the Dungeon Master is not gonna kill me on my first session, knowing it's my first session, right before our combat with the Banshee that's been triggered by the third rogue in the party, right? Okay, wait, hold on, 3 rogues, that's...
My entire family was killed by assassins, and now as an assassin myself, I will hunt down their murderers and take my revenge. You think that's bad? My best friend died saving me from my family, the gang I was once a part of. Now I've taken up the art of gunslinging and thieving, and I will avenge him. Well, I don't have any sort of tragic loss. I'm just a stick-up man. I go to those who steal from others, and I steal from them. The game's the game, after all. So, you know, obviously with the whole stealing thing, I'm playing rogue. There's only one way to settle this. Agreed. Roll for it? Yeah, sounds good. Oh, yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, no. The paladin comes into the room, but when they try to approach me and help, the Dungeon Master says they've been thrown back with a huge force of magic. Then the DM turns to me and says, I'm dead. That's it. My first ever campaign, right before the combat, which would probably take us to the end of the session. So I had to sit there for like 20 to 40 minutes of the ending to just watch them. I didn't even have time to introduce a new character. Just, nope, my character is gone. Completely. The DM says it's the consequences of my actions, but I kind of feel like crap. Okay, the consequences, but did they really have to kill me on my first game as a consequence? Well, knowing it's my first session, giving me the hope of, oh, I can still be saved, and realizing that right after this, there's going to be a long combat until the end of the game. At this point, it literally just looks like a punishment for me, considering my party did try and help me, and the DM just didn't let them? Am I being dramatic and this is normal? I should toughen up and crap? Or was it a crap move from the Dungeon Master because it did feel like that? And I'm pretty sure I wasn't as interested in the game as I am now. I'd quit playing right after stuff like this. Should I even play with them again, or is it better to find another game? Because I really did like the party. They're insanely cool. Yeah, the party's great. Your Dungeon Master just sucks. This wasn't in RPG Horror Stories. I saw this in the giant D&D forum, the one with like millions of people in it. And I was happy to see this get to the top with lots of people just telling this guy, look, your DM was being a jerk here. I understand what the DM is trying to convey, that consequences happen in D&D games, that your actions may have results that you don't like. But here, I mean, come on, what the rogue did wasn't entirely unfounded. Picking up the crown after it had already been knocked off the pedestal. I mean, why didn't the paladin get possessed when they touched it with their tail? Maybe you have to grab the crown, but that seems like semantics just to get the rogue screwed over. On top of all that, this person is brand new to the game. They've never played before. Why don't you teach them these lessons with your words instead of with a convoluted scenario that feels targeted? Because seemingly it was targeted, and that just never feels good. The game should be fun, and yeah, lessons like this are important, but don't be such a jerk about it. My God. The concept of the adventure was a Lord of the Rings style point A to point B story, while guarding a dangerous magical relic. The relic in question was the Book of Vile Darkness. The adventurers were tasked with bringing it to someone who could help them destroy it. The plan was to have a Frodo and One Ring situation where whoever would carry the book would slowly start to become corrupted by it, as it would try and tempt them into doing horrible things. Our just straight up stupid player, who was playing a rogue, was the one who carried the book with him. So the book was handed over and he was warned, do not read it. Reading the book would speed up the corruption, but it held valuable information that the party could use to overcome the various threats that they would face on their journey. It was meant to be a temptation of power kind of situation. Why did you give the book to the dumb guy?
Peregrine Took, I hate you and I think you're really stupid. But anyway, here's the One Ring of Power. I really hope you've got this, man.
This player read the book every chance he got. He wasn't even looking for anything specific in the book. He just wanted to read the dang thing. The party catches him reading the book on more than one occasion, telling him to stop reading the evil book. He would come up with an excuse each time he was caught, sometimes claiming he didn't remember opening it. This was actually something I had planned to start happening, but not until his corruption was high. I mean, he didn't even reach the threshold for this to happen in the campaign's lifespan. The party engaged in a few battles as their journey progressed, fighting wights, wild animals, and trolls. Everything seemed to be going well, other than the rogue insisting that reading the book was either fine or not his fault. I thought it was fun inter-party conflict until the mountain pass. We were a few sessions into the adventure at this point, and the party were making their way through a rocky maze of mountains. Think the stone giant scene from the first Hobbit movie. And the party had found a cave to stop and rest for the night in. This cave had, if you were standing right at the mouth of it, about a 3-foot wide path that one could walk on to navigate the mountains. Past that, there was nowhere to go but hundreds of feet straight down. It was a dangerous situation. Night soon falls, and the party sets up watch. When our player in question's watch comes up, he almost immediately pulls out the book and starts reading it. The fighter of the group by this point was very distrustful of this person and didn't go to sleep right away in order to try and catch the rogue reading the book. And they did all right. The fighter spots the rogue reading the book and lunges into action to try and stop them. The rogue threw the book right onto the ground and made for the mouth of the cave. The fighter calls for him to stop reading the book. The rogue stops right outside the cave, the heels of his boots scraping the edge of the cliff, and starts arguing with the fighter. After a pause in his speech about how reading the book was totally fine and okay, I began narration on what started happening next. His corruption was high enough that the book had begun talking to him. As you stare at your companion breathing hard, your vision seems to darken slightly, and your eyes begin drifting past their shoulders and down towards the cave floor. There you see the book resting, the skull motif on the skull seeming to look up at you. You hear a voice in your head. Jump. I was about to ask him to make a wisdom saving throw when he looked right at me and said with a complete straight face, I turn around and jump off the cliff. I had to do a double take. What? I turn around and I jump off the cliff. You do realize this isn't some kind of 50-foot drop kind of cliff. You go off the edge, you're going to fall hundreds of feet. Unless someone somehow casts Featherfall on you, you're going to die from this. Yeah, I know. You're absolutely sure about this. Yep. And that was that! The fighter made one final desperate attempt to catch the rogue before he flung himself off the cliff and failed, almost going off the cliff with him. I narrated that the fighter saw the rogue's form shrink from view until they couldn't see them anymore before a dull thud echoed up from somewhere at the bottom of the mountain pass. I asked him why he did that after the session ended, and the answer he gave me was vague. I don't quite remember what new character he brought to the next session, as this game was years ago. The game eventually ended when scheduling conflicts came up. Even to this day, I can't find a reason why he would do something like that to his own character. Maybe he thought it would be funny, maybe he was tired of playing that character, I don't know. Some clarification too, I wasn't going to kill his character if he failed the wisdom save. He would have fallen onto the side of the cliff, and the fighter would have been able to pull him up and save him. But since he apparently wanted this to happen, I just gave it to him. Yeah, I get that, and I think this player just has different expectations for what they want the game to be. They're clearly not taking it very seriously. They don't seem to care about their character nearly as much as a lot of D&D players do, and you know, that's a style. Some people are going to like that style, but a lot of games are not going to be compatible with that style, and that's the main horror story here. This person is bringing a completely different style into a game that it just doesn't fit in and expecting it to just work, and it brings down the mood for everyone else at the table. Everyone at a D&D game needs to be putting in some effort, and this person actively isn't putting in effort. They're putting in effort to not put in effort. I would have a conversation with this person about whether or not they want to stay in this game, and if they just aren't going to fix their behavior, then I don't see why they shouldn't just find a different table that fits what they're trying to do more. You know, getting killed all the time. My first true temptation into D&D style games was a homebrew Pokemon Mystery Dungeon campaign my partner invited me to, run by two game masters, one to keep the numbers straight, and the other to keep the roleplay done well. Sounds fine to me, but honestly, Pokemon is a bit of a hyperfixation for me, so of course I was going to join no matter what. My partner is a fellow dungeon master in quite a few campaigns on the Discord server it was in, and since everyone was seemingly all good friends, it was a little awkward starting out, but it all seemed to go really well since I shockingly got along with everyone. Then things started to go, downhill. Many of Game Master 1 and 2's NPCs kind of stole the whole story. See, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon has a recruitment mechanic, which they tried to implement by letting us encounter a Pokemon, usually one a session or so, that would offer to join our team, and we could bring one of them with us to every dungeon we went to. The thing is, every single one of these party members ended up strangely busted in their own way, leaving the rest of the party to basically be unable to do much of anything at all, except during boss fights, which, credit where credit was due, was the only thing I think they did right and balanced well. For a while, I thought to myself, well, maybe they just didn't balance things, or maybe this is just how RPG games are, just normally? Maybe it is normal for us to be kind of sidelined to the main events, but upon talking to the other people long after everything went down, even their normal campaigns were just like that, where DMPCs kind of swooped in and took up much of the story, and I wasn't alone in feeling relatively sidelined compared to both of their own power fantasies. If this is where it ended, though, I wouldn't be messaging this right now, since I probably would have continued being in this simple but boring campaign. It was around a month into my campaign that Game Masters 1 and 2 started to become a problem in my partner's campaigns, and while I don't know the specifics, I know they were in about 3 of his games, and each of them slowly started to drop. Each and every campaign they started out enjoying and loving it, only after a session started to go quiet and never responded to anything throughout the whole rest of the game, according to others and my partner. Then, they started to just not show up with no warning. At first, it started out by saying they would both be unable to play due to having rough mental health days, which at first everyone understood, but started to look incredibly sketchy when they were suddenly okay on days where they were the game masters. I found out after the fact that this is repeated behavior by them, and that they often seemed to either accidentally or purposefully sabotage other parties by doing this, and occasionally Game Master 1 even threw fits and went into shutdowns when they weren't allowed to join other campaigns. After several failed campaigns due to these two, since they always seem to weave their way into being important to the narrative, only to suddenly drop out, my partner was starting to feel incredibly crestfallen and feeling as if he was the failure, assuming pretty naturally that maybe his stories were too linear, not good enough, etc. I decided to stand up for my partner and told the game masters that I would not be participating in their campaigns until things were actually talked about in a voice call, as that would be easier on my partner. He has neuropathy, typing is difficult for him, and maybe apologies given, as it seemed to be a repeated pattern. This resulted in what could only be described as the most cruel and apathetic but massive set of paragraphs I have ever seen from Game Master 1. I lost the screenshots, sadly, but a lot of it was boiled down to, "You shouldn't drag IRL problems into Dungeons and Dragons." When I explained that no, their IRL problems were affecting the D&D campaigns right here and now, that they should at least consider apologizing for joining campaigns they clearly had little to no intention of actually participating in past their starting points, and that maybe they should consider others' feelings before completely ditching campaigns that they might not be able to handle. At that point, they claimed they had no empathy due to autism and DID, dissociative identity disorder, so I don't care about how he feels about this. The fact states that IRL has nothing to do with his Dungeons & Dragons games. And they continued with it, with the fact that they weren't going to apologize since they did nothing wrong. And I was kind of floored. I have autism. That's not how it works.
That's not how
Autism.
work.
And even if it was, okay, that doesn't eliminate the fact that, like it or not, they're hurting others. And hell, I even gave them the benefit of the doubt, because even if their alters are swapping out at inappropriate times, then okay, fine. You still have a responsibility for your system, no matter what identity is out front. And if you're going to use mental illnesses as an excuse, my partner also had a perfectly reasonable reason to be upset given his trauma and illnesses as well. Mental illness is not a shield for your crappy behavior. If you can't handle campaigns, stop joining them. It's not that hard. They didn't even mention once the possibility that they might have had too many sessions in a week. It ended up being a huge fight with me and my partner against Game Masters 1 and 2, with Game Master 2 taking up the majority of the second half, as Game Master 1 had regressed back into someone else in their system, which was what happened when anyone ever disagreed with GM1 over literally anything, by the way. After a few days, my partner and I were kicked from the server, and my partner sent the screenshots from the incident to all the people in the server that he knew. About half the server collapsed in as a result, and I think GMs 1 and 2 were eventually kicked out as well for repeated behavior of quitting every campaign but their own. But that's just rumors as far as I'm concerned. The funny thing is, I heard from the people who knew them in real life that Game Master 1 didn't have DID. Shocker! And self-admitted to faking it, to manipulating others into doing the things they wanted. You know, normal behavior. It took me about 6 months to even consider touching Dungeons & Dragons again, and it was only after my partner managed to run away with a few good friends from that old server and start a new one out of spite. The campaigns are going pretty well so far, and while there have been a few hiccups, it's mostly been good. Seriously though, the first rule this ended up teaching me is that you shouldn't take too many campaigns if you don't think you can handle them. While having a schedule full of D&D looks fun on the surface and may seem easy to do over Discord, you might genuinely get burnt out. And also, communicate with your party and DM if you are burning out, because otherwise you're probably going to look like inconsiderate a-holes who just seemingly left other people's parties out of sheer malice and not caring about what others thought. I really don't know how to say this, but these guys are malicious. They may not be malicious in leaving the games themselves, but lying about mental health in that way, exploiting very real mental health issues just to manipulate people, that is malicious. That is unacceptable behavior. Now, this person is right. You should absolutely not sign up for too many games. I mean, look, too much of a good thing, that makes you sick, right? I mean, come on, D&D is a big part of my career and my livelihood, and I only really play 1-2 games a week at most, and even that's pushing it. But aside from that, the main issue is how inconsiderate these people are, not just as players, but remember, as dungeon masters too. The whole DMPC thing is not okay. We've seen that countless times, and combine that with frequent flaking and having very little to no care about the people around them is a formula for disaster. And it's no wonder these guys got kicked out of the server, even if it took way too long. Seriously. The other horror stories, these server owners, what are they doing?
Darkness has consumed the land, and naught but shadow fills my life. There's a blackout. There's a blackout going on right now. It's actually a little bit concerning because it's been going on for a while, but I'm going to distract myself from worrying about my perishable goods and being concerned that I'm literally living my life by battery-powered lantern right now and get on with the outro. But if you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Tavern Adjacent podcast, where we talk about all things TTRPGs. It's linked in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Crispy's in the blackout to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Hey, by the way, if you have your own horror stories, you can send them to us. There's an email in the description. Send one our way for a chance to be featured in one of these videos. But hey, even if you don't have any stories, in essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'm going to hope to God that I survive whatever's triggering my alarm out there. And until next time, farewell.